Good morning. Appreciate that it's a bank holiday Monday and therefore it's unlikely there are people that will be with me right now, but we'll record this and I'll post it later for those who want to follow along. You'll remember at our last reading that we had that horrible incident with Haresh and him trying to steal things from the remains that were in the Schneider's flat and then being confronted by Friedrich, who spat at him and stormed off. Well, the last few chapters are as dramatic as that. So we'll read the picture, 1942. That Frau Admack tramples about like an elephant, Father commented. You wouldn't think people could make that much noise. Mother didn't look up from her knitting, she just nodded. So Father took up his newspaper once more. He looked at the clock and said, they'll be here in an hour. The three small suitcases with our most important things in them stood ready by the door. Our coats lay on a chair. Do you want to lie down for a bit before then? Asked Mother. No, Father said. I'll snooze later in the air raid shelter. Everything grew quiet. All at once, all one could hear was the ticking of the clock. I read my book. Suddenly I heard a tiny noise outside. I listened, but no one but me seemed to have heard anything. There it was again. A gentle knocking. This time Father heard it as well, and he looked up from his newspaper. Someone knocked on our door, I said. We held our breath and listened. And there it came once more, a faint knock, so faint you could barely hear it. But that's Friedrich's signal, I exclaimed and jumped up. Quiet. Stay where you are, ordered Father, pushing back me into my chair. Mother will go. Mother went, not making a sound, and when she returned, Friedrich was with her. Friedrich turned up the collar of his coat. His coat was stiff with dirt. Furtively, he came to the table and shook hands with Father and me. Furtively means just carefully, gently, in a really worried and anxious way. His hand wasn't clean either. Anxiously, he examined our faces and the room. Then he whispered, I won't stay long. First of all, you'll sit down, Father decided. But Friedrich resisted. He didn't even want to take off his coat. When he finally did, we could see that his jacket and trousers were also encrusted with dirt. Friedrich jumped every time Mother left the room. Father said nothing. Only his eyes were encouraging Friedrich to talk. It took a long time before Friedrich finally began to talk, haltingly. I have a hiding place, but I won't tell you where, he added at once. You don't have to, Father said. It's terrible. So lonely. I can only think of how it was, but I've forgotten so much. I can't even remember what Father and Mother really looked like. There's nothing to remember them by. I had to sell the watch. This is all I have left. And from his jacket pocket, he pulled the cap to the fountain pen Herr Njerdorf, our teacher, had given him for his 13th birthday. His name was still legible on it. I no longer have the other part, Friedrich explained. It may have fallen out of my pocket. Tenderly, he stroked the cap. When Mother quietly opened the door, he jumped again. Mother put a large, thick sandwich in front of him, and she stood and waited until he bit greedily into it, and then she went back to the kitchen. Friedrich wolfed down the sandwich, forgetting even to say thank you. He concentrated on eating. After he'd swallowed the last bite, almost without chewing, he picked the crumbs off his plate. Mother gave him 2 more sandwiches, which went as quickly as the first. Only then did Friedrich continue. I need a picture of father and mother, he said. I only came because I know you have one. You know, the snapshot on the horse. I know you have it. Please, may I have it? Father thought. It can only be in that large box, Mother said, and walked to the closet. She pulled out the giant chocolate box Father had given her the chocolates for their 10th wedding anniversary because he'd found work again shortly before. Mother opened the box and the topmost photo slid out. I'll look through them quickly, Father said, putting aside one picture after the other. And you come with me till they find it, Mother said to Friedrich. She had run a hot bathroom and put some of my clean clothes in the bathroom. At first, Friedrich refused, but then he went after all. The box contained many hundreds of pictures, photos, picture cards, birthday cards. Father and I searched together, but we had barely sorted through half when the sirens began to wail. Looking troubled, Friedrich dashed out of the bathroom. What shall I do now? He said, horrified. Get dressed for a start, said Father. Friedrich obediently buttoned the fresh shirt and combed his hair with shaking hands. We'll take him to the shelter with us, Mother said. Impossible, said Father. Resch'll put us in jail. We can't put him out on the street at a time like this, Mother put in. Just look at the boy. The best thing for him to do is stay right here in the apartment, Father decided. Nothing will happen, I'm sure, and he can wait here until the air raid is over, and then we'll look further for the photo. Friedrich accepted the decision without a word. But be sure not to put on any light, Father reminded him. Then we took our suitcase and went out to the air raid shelter. Friedrich looked after us fearfully. Anti-aircraft guns already thundered outside. Searchlights swayed across the sky. Planes hummed. Shrapnel spattered. Suddenly, 2 flares lit up the sky, looking like Christmas trees. In the shelter, 1942, the door to the public air raid shelter was already locked. Father put down his suitcase and maneuvered the iron bars. When the steel door wouldn't budge, he hammered on it. Herr Resch opened the door. He wore a steel helmet and an armband identifying him as the air raid warden. About time too, he growled. Father said nothing in reply. We walked into the shelter, greeting everyone there with Heil Hitler. No one answered. With eyes shut tight, women and old men sat spread over the room. Some had lain down on the benches. Everyone had his luggage beside him. 2 mothers and their small children huddled in the dark corner. The children were whining to themselves. In another corner, 2 lovers sat closely pressed against each other. And the man was a sergeant. We sat down close to the fresh air pump where we always sat. The luggage rested between our feet. Father leaned against the dank white wall and closed his eyes. You'll never get rid of that cough this way, said Mother. Father sat up straight. I can't sleep anyway, he said. I believe you, nodded Mother. Herr Resch, as air raid warden, crossed the shelter. Well, comrade, on leave, he addressed the sergeant. Startled, the sergeant shot up and agreed. We'll show them up there, eh? Herr Resch was showing off. Did you read what we shot down 35 enemy bombers yesterday? The sergeant smiled. And 35 others are taking their place today, and God knows how many more will follow. Herr Resch cleared his throat. Without another word, he turned and went back to the door. The sergeant once more embraced his girl. Outside, the pounding grew louder, and the bark of our aircraft guns sounded strangely hollow. The shots mingled with the sound of bombs exploding, singly first, then several at once. Whole groups of bombs fell together. The cellar resounded with their explosions. The poor boy, sighed Mother. Father just said, Herr Resch withdrew to the shelter proper, closing the airlock and making the shelter airtight. Again, a bomb exploded. This time it hit so close the cellar walls shook under the impact. Suddenly there was a pounding on the door. Who can that be so late? Muttered Herr Resch, searching the room. Well, go and open up, the sergeant called from his corner. Herr Resch unbarred the inner door. Now we could hear someone whimper outside. Please, please, let me in, please, please. Friedrich! Mother burst out, her mouth full open, her eyes grew large. Open up! Open up! The voice shouted, full of horror. Please, open up! Herr Resch opened the steel door. Friedrich was kneeling outside, his hands folded in prayer. I am afraid, afraid, afraid. On all fours, he crept into the airlock of the shelter. Through the open door, we could hear how hellish it was outside. The pressure of another hit threw the steel door shut. Ouch! Bellowed Herr Resch. Scram! You don't really imagine we'd let you in our shelter, do you? His breathing was labored. Ouch! Get out! The sergeant stood up and walked over to Herr Resch. Have you gone out of your mind? You can't send the boy out of a shelter in this raid. Do you know what that is? Herr Resch spattered. That's the Jew. So? The sergeant asked with astonishment. And even if it were but a dog, you'd let him stay until the raid is over. The other people in the shelter all took part now. Let the boy stay, came from all sides. Who do you think you are? Herr Resch screamed. How dare you mix in my affairs? Who is air raid warden here, you or I? You have followed my orders, is that understood? Otherwise I will report you. No longer sure of himself, the sergeant stood and looked at Friedrich. Everyone was silent. The guns still sounded. Very pale. Friedrich still leaned in the airlock. He had calmed down. Go, boy. Go. Voluntarily, the sergeant said softly. Otherwise, there'll be nothing but annoyance. Without a word, Friedrich left the shelter. Shots and bombs thundered without a break. We can even hear the whistling sound of the falling bombs and the rushing sound of the incendiary bombs. Mother cried against Father's shoulder. Do pull yourself together, begged Father. You'll endanger us otherwise. Do you see how the iron grip of the dictatorial state squeezes good people and doesn't allow them to act as they would with their conscience? Therefore, it's very important that we, as individuals, stay alert and don't let the iron grip of dictatorship and propaganda stop us from acting and doing what is best. Otherwise, there could be tragic consequences, as we shall see. The end, 1942. Dust and heat greeted us outside. The sky glowed red with the light of fires. Flames still came from roofs and hollow windows. Heaps of rubble smouldered. Glass splinters and fragments of tiles covered the street. In between lay the incendiary bombs that had missed their targets. Desperate women cried in front of ruins from which clouds of dust and pulverized bricks still rose. Beside a garden wall lay a human being. Someone had thrown a shredded slip over the face. Supporting Mother between us, we searched for the way home. Herr and Frau Resch came with us. A bomb had ripped open the street outside our house, but the house still stood. The roof was partly uncovered, and none of the windows had any glass. We stepped into the front garden. At once, Herr Resch made for the little bit of lawn. He picked up his garden dwarf, Polycarp. A piece of shrapnel had cut off the tip of his cap. Herr Resch searched for it. When he discovered it, despite the darkness, he said to Father, "What a shame. I'll try to glue it back on." Fearfully, Mother looked for Friedrich. Friedrich sat in the shadow of the stoop. His eyes were closed, his face pale. "Are you crazy?" Father couldn't help asking. At that, Herr Resch also noticed him. Father was still standing on the path. It's obvious he didn't know what to do. Herr Resch pushed his wife aside and stepped closer, still carrying Polycarp. "Away from here!" he thundered at Friedrich. "Do you think you no longer have to fear being sent away just because everything's out of whack after this air raid?" Shrilly, Mother said, "Can't you see he's fainted?" A mocking smile on his face, Herr Resch turned to Mother and said, "Fainted indeed. I'll get him out of here quickly enough. I must say I'm surprised at your sympathy for a Jew. You, the wife of a member of the Nazi party." Father pulled her aside. She was sobbing. Herr Resch lifted his foot and kicked. Friedrich rolled out of the shelter of the entrance way onto the stone path. A trail of blood went from his right temple to his collar. I clutched the thorny rosebush. "His luck that he died this way," said Herr Resch. So there's lots we could explore about the story of Friedrich and Hans Peter Richter. A true story in many ways, obviously embellished, but with the novelist's flair. But what we really must take from this novel is that very clear message that all it takes is for good people to do nothing for evil to succeed. So I hope you enjoyed reading Friedrich with us, or with me. I will post this online. We're going to next read a novel called Stone Cold by Robert Swindells. And just to give you a sense of what we're going to read, I'm going to read you the back on the book here. Kids are disappearing, but no one cares. Homeless, frightened and alone, Link finds himself down and out in London. He only survives because he's befriended by streetwise Ginger. When Ginger disappears, Link is in despair. Other kids are vanishing now, and the killer is stalking his next victim. Will it be Link? So I thought I might just give us a sneak preview of the first 2 pages. You can call me Link. It's not my name, but it's what I say when anybody asks, which isn't often. I'm invisible, see, one of the invisible people. But right now I'm sitting in a doorway watching the passers-by, and they avoid looking at me. They're afraid I want something they've got, and they're right. Also, they don't want to think about me. They don't like reminding I exist, me and those like me. We live in proof that everything's not all right, and we make the place untidy. Hang about, I'll tell you the story of my fascinating life. Chapter 2. Daily routine orders 1, shelter. Yes, I like it. It's got a ring to it, as I'm sure you'll agree. Shelter, as in shelter from the stormy blast. Yeah, it's what they're all seeking. The street people. What they crave. If they can only find shelter, everything will be fine. Well, get fell in, my lucky lads. I'm ready for you. So they're the first 2 pages of the next book I hope we might read together. If you'd like to join me, I will copy some of the pages and post them onto Showbie, and you can follow along. Have a lovely bank holiday Monday, and hopefully I'll see some of you on Wednesday when we will continue our reading at 9:30.
What's that? Another cup of tea, I think.